Oh. This plan of action that had come to him while he had been on duty at the outpost during the retreat. He had laid the plan before Bukowski, and now he had every intention of laying it before Kutuzov. It was based on the fact that the French operations line was overextended, and his idea was that instead of a frontal attack blocking the French advance, or maybe that instead of a frontal attack blocking the French advance, or maybe along with an attack of that kind, they ought to concentrate on their communications. He had been explaining his plan to Prince Andrei. They can't defend the whole of that line. It's not possible. I guarantee I could break through it. Give me 500 men and I'll cut their communications. For sure I will. There's only one system that will work. Denisov got to his feet and began to elaborate for Bolkonsky's benefit, and much waving of the arms. He was in the mid-flow when suddenly they heard soldiers shooting a gun. Rage sounds this time that blended with the music and sung over a wide area near the parade ground. Hoofbeats and cheering soon could be heard in the nearby village. He's coming, shouted the Cossack from the gate. Bolkonsky and Denisov walked over to the gate while a little group of soldiers formed guard of honor. And there was Kutuzov coming down the street on a little bay horse, in the incense suite of coming down the street on a bay horse. The generals followed on. Prince Andrei was riding almost a level with him, and a great crowd of officers was scurrying about behind them and on every side with the loud cries of a hurrah. He adjutants were first into the yard. Kutuzov shrugged his heels into his horse, which was ambling along so slowly under his weight, and white horse guard's cap with its red band and no peak. When he got to the guard of honor, he saluted by a set of elite soldiers, most of them sporting decorations. He paused for a moment in silence, and he looked at them very closely and steady to gaze of a true commander before turning to the group of generals and the other officers standing around him. The subtitle, Changing Exploration. And he shrugged with an air of bemusement. What with men like these, nothing but retreat after retreat. He said, "Well, goodbye, General," he added, and urged his horse in through the gateway, right past Prince Andrei and Denisov. "Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah!" went the roaring horse voices behind him. Since the last time Prince Andrei had seen Kutuzov, had put on even more weight, and now he really looked flabby, bloated with fat. But something about him had not changed. The familiar scar in the wild eye, and over all the impressions of awareness in face and figure, as well as the white horse guard's cap. He was wearing a military greatcoat. It was a whip on a narrow strap slung across his shoulders. He sat on his game little horse very badly. He wheezed through. The sound was barely of a man looking forward to a nice rest after being a long time in the limelight. He withdrew his left foot was to stir up and a lurch of the big body and screwed with the excitation as he brought it up onto the saddle. He used his knee to steady himself and flopped down with the ground into the supporting arms of his Cossack. And he pulled himself together, looked around with his eyes half closed, glanced at Prince Andrei, seemed not to recognize him, and shambled off the directions of the steps. Ugh, he wheezed and turned to take another look at Prince Andrei. As often with the old man, the impression of Prince Andrei's face had taken some seconds to trigger a memory of his personality. "Oh, hello, my dear fellow. Hello there. Do you come along?" he said, willingly, lumbering up the stairs and creaked under his weight. He unbuttoned his coat and sat down on the bench in the porch. "Well then, how's your father keeping?"
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I had to spray something.
What?
Because Opal peed a little bit right there.
Okay, then.
Yeah, I'm going to brush and wipe the water off.
Come on, hurry up.
News of his death reached me yesterday, said Prince Andrei. Cap off himself, God rest of his soul. "Off the country? Well, what do you mean?" "Out with it." Denisov covered up like a young girl. It was most odd to see a blush spreading over that hairy, aging, hard, dark drinking face, and launched into a confident position of his plan and cutting the enemy's line of the operations somewhere between Moscow and St. Petersburg. "Indeed not, Your Serene Highness," said the general to Kutuzov. Kutuzov shook. "Indeed not." Kutuzov shook his head as if to say, "How can one man be so efficient?" He turned his mind back to Denisov. "On my word of honor as a Russian officer," Denisov was saying, "I shall cut way through Napoleon's communications." "Are you related to the Intendant General Kuril of Denisov?" asked Kutuzov, interrupting. "Yes, my uncle, sir." "Oh, we used to be friends," said Kutuzov breezily. Very, very good, dear boy. You stay here on the staff and we'll have a little talk
Yeah, just take
that the papers had brought over. If your highness would like to come through into the house, you would be most welcome, he said. The duty general, are the plans to be gone over and some papers to sign. An adjutant appeared in the doorway and announced that all was Julius was in, but Kuzazov seemed not to want people with him. When he went inside, he scowled. No, have a table brought out here. I'll go through them here, he said. Don't you go away, he added, turning to Prince Andre. Prince Andre stayed there at the porch listening to what the duty general had to say. While they were busy to the report, and Prince Andre detected a woman's voice whispering inside of the doorway. He caught the rustle woman's of silk dress several times, glancing across. He noticed behind the door a good-looking man with red cheeks and a full figure, wearing a pink dress with a lilac silk scarf over her head. She was holding a dish and seemed to be waiting for the commander-in-chief to come in. Kuzazov, adjutant, explained to Prince Andrei in a whisper that this was the priest's life. It was her house, and she was going to welcome His Highness with the traditional bread and salt. Her husband had met this Great Highness with a cross in the church, and now it was her turn in the house. She's very pretty, added the adjutant with a smile.
I'm just trying to comfort you.
Kuzazov glanced around at these words. He was listening to the duties general report, mostly critical of the positions at Tsar Ivo Zemishchi. Just as he had listened to Denisov, and just as he listened to debate at the Council of War for Austerlitz 7 years ago. He was obviously listening because he had ears to listen with. And even though one of them was packed with tow for his ear, they could not help hearing, but it was obvious that nothing that the general could possibly say was going to be any of interest, let alone surprise him, because he had heard it before, and if it was listening, it was only because he had to, just as you had listened to the service in the church. Every word spoken by Denisov like a business-like and sensible. What was the general was now saying was even more business-like and intelligent, because he knew something different that would win the day, something different, independent and intellectual knowledge. Prince Andrei kept a mixed with curiosity of a female voice whispering, obvious that Kuzazov had no time to intellect or hearing or even the eager patriotism shown by Denisov, and his distaste was not based or intellectual testament or knowledge, none of which he had any precision towards. It came from something else, old age and long experience. The only advancement to the report made by Kutuzov himself to do looting with the Russian soldiers, and the last item in the general's report was the document printed for His Highness' signature relating to the landowner's claim for compensation from the army authorities and commandering of his green coats. Kutuzov smacked his lips and shook his head as he listened to this claim, took it in the stove, into the fire with it, and I'll tell you once for all the default, he said chuck everything like into the fire, let him cook the corn and burn the wood. I haven't told them to, and they...
Scoot your chair in, please, Atticus.
Thank you.
Well, that's then, said Kutuzov as he signed the last document and lumbered to his feet. He smoothed out the rolls onto his fat white neck and walked over to the door with a look about him.
Thanks,
Is that my medicine?
Kutuzov
Oh, sorry, I forgot to bring it up, Mom.
kindly expression to
What do you want me to
innocent
put your medicine in?
Upstairs.
suggestion of
Upstairs?
irony. He cut Bolkonsky short. You would have been useful to me, but you're right. You're quite right. It's not here that good men are indeed. That's never shortage of, but good men are hard to come by. Their regiments wouldn't be what they are if this served in them like you. I remember you at Austerlitz. Yes, I do remember. With you with that flag, said Kutuzov, and Prince Andrei's face flushed with pleasure at memory of it. Kutuzov drew him close, offering him a cheek to kiss, and again Prince Andrei caught a glimpse of tears in the old man's eyes, even though Prince Andrei knew Kutuzov was prone to tears. And he was being nice to him in order to show sympathy for his recent loss. He still felt pleased and flattered by this reminder of Austerlitz. Make your way over then, and God go with you. I know your way. It's the way of honor. He paused. I miss your. I indeed someone to send. And he was on to another subject, the Turkish war and the peace that had been concluded. Oh yes, I've had my share of criticism, he said, for the war and the peace, but everything fell into place at that right time. Everything falls into place for the man who knows how to wait, he said, quoting the French proverb. And there were just too many there as there are here. He went on, falling back on the subjects that had become the obsession with him. He said, if we listened to him, we'd still be in Turkey without any peace. and with the war still on, too much of hurry, more haste, less speed, I say, Kaminsky would have to come to some grief right here. If he hadn't died first, he went about storming fortresses with the 30,000 men taking fortresses. It's easy enough. The hard part is winning with the war and the time and patience. Use the soldiers to attack. I used those two, time and patience, and I took more fortresses than he did, and I soon had the Turks eating the horse meat. He shook his head, and still I'll have the French doing it too. Take my word for it, cried Kutuzov, warming his chest to patting himself on the chest. I'll have them eating horse flesh. And again his eyes were misty with tears. But we shall fight, shan't we? Said Prince Andrei. Oh yes, but if that's what my people want, they'll have it. But mark my words, dear boy, there's nothing stronger than those two old soldiers' time and patience. There's nothing they can do but our wise conciliatory and are deaf in one ear. And that's where the trouble is. Some want action, others don't. How or why it came about, Prince Andrei could never have explained. But after this encounter with Kutuzov, he returned to his regiment, greatly reassured about the way things were going in. The man had been entrusted to, the more clearly he had registered the man they had entrusted to, the more clear absence of all personal interest in this old man who seemed to have reduced himself to going through the motions of old passions and have replaced in an active and mind capable of organizing things and coming unfolded and more confident. He felt that everything would work out as it should. He has no axe to grind. He won't have any ideas or everybody to miss nothing. He'll put the things in their proper places. He won't get in the way of anything useful or allowed anything that will get in the way of anything useful or allow anything much to harm. He knows that there's something stronger and more important than his will. The inexorable march of events and he has the knack of watching events and seeing what they mean. And when he sees what they mean, he knows how to stand back from them and redirect his will somewhere else. But the main reason for believing in rhetoric, his will somewhere else. But the main reason for believing in him, thought Prince Andrei, is that the Russians, never mind Madame and a few French proverbs, and his voice shook when he said, "Is this what we've been reduced to?" He choked. It was this feeling shared some more or less than by everyone that underpinned the humanity and general approval which accompanied the appointment of Kutuzov as a commander-in-chief. The people's choices, whatever misgivings they have been felt in the court circles. I need to pee. What kind of things? Asked Peter. Was up? The shrunk did look. Julie smiled at him. Oh, Count, really? Knights like you don't exist outside. The pages of Madame's novels. What can you possibly mean? Asked Peter, coloring up. Come on now, my dear Count. It's all over, Moscow. Honestly, I do admire you. But her last words had come out in the French, and they brought cries or find again. The military man. Oh, all right. You can't even talk now. It's such a bore. What's all over Moscow? Said Pierre, getting up to his feet with some resentment. Oh, come on, Count. You know very well. I absolutely nothing, said Pierre. I know you close. You've been nice to Natasha, so actually I was closer to Vera myself, such a darling girl. No, Madam. Pierre persisted, still disgruntled. I have certainly not assumed the role of the Countess Rostov's knight. I haven't been near the place for 1 month. How could you be so cruel? I think you do protest too much, cried Julie with a smile, brandishing her lint, determined to have the last word. She promptly changed the subject. By the way, I've just heard that poor Bolkonsky arrived in Moscow yesterday. You know, she lost her father. She hadn't really. Where is she? I very I'd very much like to see her, said Pierre. I spent yesterday evening with her. Today or tomorrow morning she'll talk about her nephew down to her Moscow estate. Well, how is she? How's she getting on, said Pierre. Oh, she's alright, just feeling very sad. You will never guess who came to rescue her. It's so romantic. Nikolai Rostov. She was surrounded. They were trying to kill her, and the servants had been wounded. He just rushed and saved her. Another romance. All this running away has a clear purpose: to get all the Bolkonsky maid married off. There's a cat. One for one, and now Princess Bolkonsky. You know what I think? She's just a little in love with Pierre. Find again, but how can you sing things like that in Russian? When Pierre got home, he was handed 2 new Rumpkin posters that had been brought during the day. The first rumor that Count Rupkin had stopped the people leaving Moscow. On the contrary, he was glad to see the lives were going, less panic, less rumors. He said, the notice. For one's sake, I stake my life. That scoundrel will never set my foot on Moscow. Oh, yeah.